Steph Cooke is the member for Cootamundra. That's what we've known her as, and she still is, but she's also the Emergency Services Minister. Congratulations on your appointment.
Thanks, Ricky. Good morning, and it's lovely to be with you today.
First of all, when we finished talking just before Christmas, you were saying the harvesters would still be going locally. Look out for harvesters and other machinery and trucks on the roads. We're hearing they were still harvesting early into February. Are we all done at last in your electorate?
It's getting very close to wrapping up now, thank goodness. There's a bit of harvesting for hay occurring at the moment, which is good to have that feed on hand should it be required into the future. But very, very challenging season for our farmers, particularly given the number of storm events, rain events, and flooding, etc., that we had right across, particularly central and southern New South Wales, which takes in certainly most of the Cootamundra electorate. So I think farmers will be pretty relieved, and now they'll be turning their attention, of course, to the winter plantings and getting on with that.
Yep, and I guess there's been a common problem we've picked up around the southeast of Australia regarding the input costs, inputs such as fertiliser and chemical sprays. Are you hearing those sorts of concerns locally as well?
Yes, there's no doubt that there are challenges confronting our farming sector at the moment. And I guess, I do feel at times that if it's not one thing, it's another. You know, our farmers have been through so much in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of drought and bushfires, flooding and mice. Of course, we had a significant mouse plague over the last sort of 18 months or so, which sort of, peaks and dips at various times. So, and input costs are rising. The good news is that grain and commodity prices are holding up pretty strongly, which is good news. So for those farmers that have been able to get a crop off, they're seeing some benefit from that, which is a far cry from what it was like during the drought. Yeah,
absolutely. Speaking of drought, which seems a distant memory just at the moment, we've had the sort of dual challenges of fire risk as well as flooding. Can you walk us through the disaster declaration that was announced recently, which touches largely on your electorate?
Yes. So over the summer period, we've had a number of natural disaster declarations that have been applicable to areas hit by storms and floods across the local government areas that make up, again, Western, Southern and Central West New South Wales. So particularly in relation to Temora and Narrandera, they've had a natural disaster declaration which at a Category B level, which has unlocked concessional loans of up to $130,000 for primary producers, some transport subsidies of up to $15,000 if you need to move stock because where they're located, it's not safe for them to remain in that paddock, for example, or if you need to move them off to market, of course. There's also loans for small businesses and not-for-profits and sporting clubs, etc. So those all of that support is available until August of this year, early August. So I always encourage people to don't leave it to the last minute. If you have been impacted by recent storm and flooding events, please reach out to the Rural Assistance Authority, the RAA as we know it in New South Wales, or Services New South Wales, and they will give you a hand to really understand your eligibility and help you get on and make those applications.
Now, speaking of flooding as well, we've picked up not just in New South Wales SES, but the Victorian SES as well, some frustration about people driving through floodwaters. Is that a real and present risk in your part of the world?
Oh, yes. I mean, every time you get a significant rain or storm event, and sometimes, as we know, across rural landscapes, those creeks can come up really quickly. The causeways can see a large inflow of water quite quickly. And I'm a long-standing member of the SES in New South Wales, and I can speak firsthand to the fact that people do at times. A lot of the times, I think people think they know those roads quite well, or they know those causeways, and they think they've got a pretty good idea about whether they will or won't be able to make it across the other side. And at times, people do just get caught out. Even the people most familiar with those areas get caught out. Not to mention travellers and, people with caravans and towing boats and things like that. who may not be as familiar with the roads, they're even at greater risk, in my view. So, yeah, look, it's just a timely reminder for people. If you're approaching water, and just don't cross. Just really seek some advice on what's occurring at that point, because you're putting yourself at risk, and any passengers that you might have, you're putting those people at risk, but you're also actually putting the emergency services volunteers at risk as well. They're the ones that drop everything in a heartbeat to come and rescue people from floodwaters. And it would be very nice if people didn't put our lives at risk as well. So.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier some farmers were still potentially cutting hay in the electorate. The haystack fires is something that's suddenly popping up more commonly this year than maybe other years, maybe because of the moisture in the fires. Are the local RFS fairly stretched on the ground with those issues and just the general preparation during the fire season?
Look, our New South Wales RFS are very well resourced. The brigades are always on standby for incidents like that. I mean, we've got, nearly 2,000 RFS brigades covering 95% of New South Wales. So always on the lookout for those types of events, and certainly across the Cootamundra electorate, a lot of the brigades are actually really rurally based. So they're not sort of on the edge of town. They're actually, for anyone passing by, you'll see a rural fire shed, on the edge of a paddock. So they are strategically placed in order to be able to respond to any local incidents that pop up. And it's unfortunate when you get a haystack or a hay shed fire, devastating for those farming families who are impacted by that. But at the end of the day, we've certainly got the resources on hand to be able to manage those incidents.
And there was a survey published by the RFS in the last 48 hours about the issue of mandatory vaccination against COVID-19. And there was a response of about 80% of brigades expressed concern if that became mandatory across the service. The RFS saying they're going to go and look further into how those brigades might operate under a mandatory regime. Where is the government at on mandating vaccination in the service?
So as you've indicated, in relation to RFS employed personnel, there's been a mandatory vaccination policy in place for several months now in relation to paid employees. The service has been gone on to consult with volunteers on their views in relation to mandatory vaccination to understand the implications of any policy on local services and our ability to protect local communities. So that consultation has occurred across more than 70,000 volunteers, which that's just absolutely enormous and very, very meaningful consultation. I'm pleased to report, and having considered all of the responses, nearly 80% of brigades either support mandatory vaccination or would be no worse off if it were introduced. And on that basis, the RFS, following the lead of the SES in New South Wales and Fire and Rescue New South Wales, are also mandating vaccination for volunteers. So in relation to the brigades that either didn't support mandatory vaccination or have indicated that there will be some impacts on their ability to respond to local emergencies, the RFS is, as we speak, working through issues with those local brigades just to really understand where they're at, what that position is, and it's my expectation that consultation will continue in a very meaningful and respectful way, because at the end of the day, we would really like all of our volunteers to be vaccinated for their own health and well-being and safety, and of course the safety of those around them that they're also interacting with.
When it comes to the statement from the RFS, they indicated some exemptions might be possible, I imagine, as a result of that consultation. How might an exemption work for certain brigades or certain volunteers?
Well, that's something, Ricky, that's being worked through by the RFS at the moment, and I'm more than happy to come back onto your show and talk about that specific issue once further consultation has occurred with those remaining brigades. It's really important that we take our volunteers on a journey with us, and that process is just underway at the moment. As you know, the announcement is only about 48 hours old, not quite that. So we've got a bit more work to do to talk to our volunteers and brigades. And when we better understand what that looks like, then we'll have more to say.
All right. Well, Steph Cooke, over on Macquarie Street, I imagine, for the sittings of Parliament this week. Look forward to hearing more from you, not only as a member for Cootamundra, but as our Emergency Services Minister as well. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much for your time as well, Ricky.